Welcome back to the Safe House. I'm Jordan Paul. In a previous episode, we talked a little bit about political Zionism, the Greater Israel Project. And I want to start out by reading a portion of an article to you, and we're going to break it down, dissect it. The U.S. had a plan in the 1960s to blast an alternative Suez Canal through Israel using 520 nuclear bombs. A declassified memorandum revealed in 1963 U.S. planned to create an alternative to the Suez Canal. It would have excavated more than 160 miles through Israel's Negev desert with nuclear bombs. A cargo ship is currently stuck in the... That's a side note. The U.S. considered a proposal to use 520 nuclear bombs to carve out an alternative to the Suez Canal through Israel in the 1960s. The plan never came to fruition, but having an alternative waterway to the Suez Canal could have been useful in March 2021 when a cargo ship stuck in the narrow path was blocking one of the world's most vital shipping routes. According to the 1963 memorandum, which was declassified in 1996, the plan would have relied on 520 nuclear bombs to carve out the waterway. The memo called for the use of nuclear explosives for excavation of Dead Sea Canal across the Negev desert. Okay, so there's a problem with this Ben Gurion Canal. From what I understand, it would go right through the north part of Gaza. And I've even heard in some news outlets Israel encouraging Palestinians to move south. So I know we've talked about October 7th and whether or not the Israeli intelligence knew it was going to happen, whether or not the IDF knew this was going to happen. We've heard about false accusations of killing babies and rapes and things like that. Well, I would say that this supports this. Now, it's been my theory for a long time. I said in the very beginning when all this really started to go down after October 7th, which this did not start October 7th, I said this isn't going to end anytime soon. This is how Israel moves forward in its Greater Israel Project. Israel does not want peace. This is a big part of why Israel, having given offers put on the table over the years, peace offers, they don't want it. If they had peace, then they wouldn't have the support of the world much of the world in what they're doing. If they had peace, they wouldn't have a reason or an excuse for doing what they're doing. They're leveling Gaza. They're committing genocide to get them out of the way, to motivate the Palestinians to leave. Could it be that when Israel suggests that other Arab nations take the Palestinians in, that these other nations, these governments of other Arab nations, know that it is the Palestinians that quite literally stand between Israel and their Ben Gurion Canal. The Suez Canal is under the control of Egypt. And now remember, this was the memorandum was leaked, and it was a plan put together in the 60s. So 1967 war, the 6-Day War. Egypt cut Israel off from use of the Suez. I've said this from the very beginning. This is not about the Jews returning to their homeland. I'm sure many of Jews that have immigrated to Israel believe that that's what this is. However, if they're a practicing Jew, if they've read their doctrines, they would know that the Messiah, the Jews return, and they have, it's prophesied that they return back to the land God promised them when their Messiah comes. And to my knowledge, the Judeo Messiah has not come. This is not about their religion, their faith, their promise by God, from God. This is political Zionism. This is strategy. You know, and we started this show off. I started this show off talking about Holocaust revision. And we will connect more dots, but let me just start to spell it out for you. Okay? I'm not for the oppression of any people. I'm against any historical oppression against Jews. I'm against any historical oppression against Muslims or Christians or any minority or any person, even minority or not. Okay? But the narrative that we learned in school and on television and Hollywood movies, they left out a lot of stuff. It's not Hollywood's responsibility. Hollywood is there to entertain and dramatize things, okay? So I'm not really being critical of them. I'm just pointing out the obvious here, or maybe not so obvious, but the facts. Israel has in the past created hysteria amongst Jewish populations in other parts of the world to encourage them to immigrate to Israel. Israel has a mandatory military service for both men and women. So they need soldiers because they're colonizing this area by force. They take land from Palestinians by force. So in 1950 in Iraq, Avi Shlem talks about how his family ended up immigrating to Israel. He talks about how Zionism was a white European Jew project or movement. This is why they had to create hysteria amongst other Arab Jews and Jews around the world to get them, to encourage them to move to Israel. There was a series of 5 bombs in 1950 in Jewish populated areas, 3 of which they found to be connected to the Mossad. The underground Zionist movement in Iraq worked with Mossad agents, planted these bombs, and created a movement of Jews moving to Israel, making them feel unsafe in their homes. Okay, the USS Liberty. We don't have to go into details. You learn about it. You decide if you think that that was a false flag operation or not. The Lavon affair in Egypt. Look that up. Another false flag operations done by the Mossad or the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service or Special Intelligence Service, whatever it was, Secret Intelligence Service, ISIS, which is interesting. So a lot of what the narrative from the Holocaust, now I'm not denying there was a Holocaust. I'm not denying the poor treatment of Jews by the National Socialists, but we're going to touch on a few things here. Because when I grew up learning about this in school, I just learned that there was a really evil man who put together a really evil regime just because he hated Jews for no reason. Now, I'm not saying there is a good reason to hate people. at all. Most definitely is not what I'm saying. But Zionism dated back prior to the National Socialist regime. There was a small minority of Jews in Germany, other places too, but particularly in Germany, that wanted the immigration of Jews to Palestine so that they could start to colonize it because of its strategic location due to the Suez Canal. I don't care what anybody else tells you. This is my opinion. But there were many German Jews in the Weimar Republic of Germany. Weimar Germany was a decent place for Jews. They were a middle to upper class minority. So they needed reasons to get these German Jews to move to Palestine. They didn't want to go. Life was good. They were not just Jews, they were Germans. They liked Germany was their home. So it has been said that hysteria between the National Socialists and the Jews had, I'm sure plenty of it was organic and natural, but that it was pushed, that it was instigated. These differences between them and the static between them was instigated not by all Jews, but by the Zionist Jews to encourage German Jews to move to Palestine. So some believe, I'm not going to tell you that I believe this, but we can try to connect some dots here, start trying to make sense of things, because I'll be honest, just some evil man putting together an evil regime just out of all pure hatred in his heart for no reason always seemed a little funny to me. One of the reasons why Hitler and the National Socialists disliked Jews is because the Bolshevik communist revolution that had taken place in Russia was primarily a Jewish movement. And Hitler believed in an international Jew conspiracy that betrayed Germany in World War I, made life horrible for the Germans after World War I, until the National Socialists came into power and turned things around for the German population, for all of the German population. Unemployment wiped out in just a few years. I'm not a Nazi. I'm not an anti-Semite, okay? I'm going to say that a few times through this. I am not a Nazi. But there was a reason why the Jews were disliked by so many, and they were, and I don't support that. We're just trying to learn history accurately here. Okay? Some believe that rumors were spread not just in Germany, but in London, in England, in the United States, in France, in Russia, all over, embellishing on the conditions of the German Jew and the poor conditions of the German Jew pre-World War II to encourage them to move to Palestine. I also think that regardless of what the final solution really was, whether it was to exterminate or whether it was to expel the Jews, Hitler and the National Socialists wanted the German Jews to move to Palestine too. But that doesn't mean that the German Jew wanted to leave. So I would lead you to the transfer agreement by Edwin Black. I'm reading it right now. It's about the collaboration between the National Socialists and the Zionists to get people to Palestine, to get the Jews to Palestine. At the time, you had to have $5,000 to go to Palestine as a German Jew. So the poor German Jews couldn't do that. And the middle to upper class German Jews that could do that didn't want to leave. Life was good for them. I'm not an anti-Semite. I think it's fair to say. So we talked about how the 6 million number, as controversial as it is irrelevant anymore. In 1989, the number of people killed at Auschwitz was revised from just over 4 million to just over 1 million. That's 3 million Jews. It was reduced by 75%. If the number of people killed at Auschwitz was a part of the number of total Jews killed, that means that the number went from 6 million to 3 million. Still horrible. But that is a revision. So these people that look at Holocaust revisionists as kooks, I would step back a little bit and look at this. Don't take it up with me. Take it up with the museum at Auschwitz. And I think it's fair to say, if I was an anti-Semite, a Nazi that wanted Jews dead, I would prefer 6 million had died than 3. This is good news. It's good news for everybody, for the Jews too. Not as many people died as you thought. This is good news. But in the early mid-60s, maybe late 50s, a lot of these narratives about how bad it was, and I'm certain it was bad. Anytime you put anybody in a labor camp as a political prisoner, or just because they're Jewish, is horrible. Anytime you kill anybody because of their ethnicity, it's horrible. But a lot of these narratives were really they were used as almost marketing to get the sympathy of the world for Israel, because they were occupiers and they were pushing innocent Palestinians out of their land, stealing their homes, stealing their olive groves, their farms. The self-determination was okay for the Jew, but not for the Palestinians. An apartheid state is a racist state. For anybody that has Jewish DNA, if they can prove through genetics, they can move to Israel, become a citizen, and that fast have more rights than a Palestinian who were native to the land. And I know Jews say this was our land, we're just returning to it. Well, it wasn't just your land. It was Arabs as well. And everywhere in the world, Jews were a minority. They're a minority in the United States. They were a minority in Germany. They're a minority in Russia, England. They've always been a minority. They're a small group of people compared to most. So I hardly think, even if this was some kind of prophetic return to the home, that the idea was that you go and not assimilate, but you go and forcefully remove people from their homes and commit genocide and build militias so that you can do this. And then later, very well-armed armies. I have a hard time believing that that is what is prophesied. However, I'm not an expert on that issue, I'll admit. So, supremacy, I am against supremacy. It's like Dan Bilzerian said, I heard him in an interview. I thought it was great interview. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-German. I'm not anti-British. I'm not anti-Arab. I am against supremacy. It was not okay when the National Socialists wanted to build an Aryan master race and exterminate or expel the Jews, and it's not okay for the Jews to build a Jewish master race and expel the Arabs. And remember, Iran means land of the Aryans. So it was probably more history to that. That would be interesting to learn. But this is just a continuation. It's just now it's the Jews doing what the National Socialists did in World War II and leading up to it. When I started to research unpopular history about the Jews in World War II and the National Socialists, it was like a foreign language to me because I was really indoctrinated with propaganda to believe this is only one-sided and the Jews have always ever been just completely innocent and that they will always ever be just completely innocent. I don't think that any one race, creed, color, nationality has the market cornered when it comes to good and evil. That is the point. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize or to be critical of Israel. It's not anti-Semitic to point out the positives economically that came in Germany from the National Socialists. This is just understanding things correctly. History happened one way. That's the task, is to try to figure out how it happened accurately. And the further we get away from it, the more narratives that arise, it can be a difficult and daunting task. But you're not going to hear this kind of talk on Fox or CNN or anything in between. Not MSNBC, not ABC, not BBC. You're starting to hear it on some independent podcasts and YouTube channels. And when people like Dan Bilzerian come out and start saying the things that he said, man, he's attacked in the media. But if you listen to what he says, instead of getting emotional over certain trigger words that we've been programmed to respond to emotionally, when you listen to what he says, it's rational, compassionate, loving equality. Right? We're not supposed to hate anybody because of their race or nationality, right? That's what I was taught. Not anybody. We're not supposed to give anybody a pass or justify genocide because of what they've experienced in the past, what their ancestors maybe experienced. Right? Genocide, there's no justification for genocide. It's never okay to commit ethnic cleansing of any ethnicity. That's what I was taught. That's what I learned along the way. Like, subscribe, comment below, hit the notification bell. Until next time.